Today's video is what if Lightning and Damian swap seasons. Now, Lightning and Damian are two of my favorite characters. Ian is my favorite romantic island, and Damian's my favorite one of my heroes in the reboot. So let's begin. Damian gets put onto the Rats team, and let's see how this unfolds. So in episode 1, I have no reason to believe the events will change, so I think Damian would help and B would get along pretty well with Dawn, and I feel like here there's still no reason for Stacy not to get voted off like normal. Again, Scott throws for 15 seconds and Taylor gets through for Dakota. Scott sabotages B, and Brick swaps to the Rats. Okay, and backstabbers ahoy. I think there wouldn't be anything that changes here. Damian would pump, and I think in the end, Scott would still find items on Dawn, but would want to get rid of Damian as quick as possible because he's really smart and could be a problem for Scott. Episode 6 is Runaway Model, and I think in this challenge, Scott would end up losing for his team, so Joe wins. The Rats Maggots win. I think Damian, so Scott Brick. So Scott talks to Sam that he'd get rid of Damian because he's a know-it-all. But I think Scott's unable to convince Brick or Damian to vote for Sam. So I think Sam still goes, as Scott's not able to pull off anything to get rid of Damian. And Joe and Scott still swap teams. In episode 8 is where we have a Mind's Terrible Thing. Now, Damian wouldn't cause a cave-in on the Rats team. So I think this means that he would be really afraid, and Brick would still go around to save the maggots. So, sending the Rats to elimination, now Damian would side with Brick to get rid of Joe, because he would have seen Brick as a more honourable opponent, saving other members of his team. And Anne-Maria still quits after the challenge, so there's still no reason for that not to happen. In episode 8, Dakota's always still going back as a player. Scott still throws the challenge, and because Damian's still here, there's no reason for Damian or Brick not to go. Because even though Damian's really smart, I think Scott would see that Damian is very scared of challenges, so he wouldn't do that well. And Scott used to use his idol to get rid of Dakota Zoid. And now we're at the merge, and the cast remains the same, with Damian and Brick replacing Joe and Lightning. In episode 9, I think Grand Theft Auto, Scott still blackmails Mike to episode and throws the team statue. And because Scott can't blackmail something he's not keeping a secret, he chooses to get rid of Mike. In episode 10, Damian just basically replaces Lightning and makes the balloon. I think without Lightning here now, Damian would get to the top. And Brick, and I think because Brick, I think Damian would now win the challenge, as I think Damian would be able to make something that would get him to the top to stop Heather. And because he's Scott, and Scott's the biggest threat, is not immune, and without Joe here to be a physical threat, Scott can't save himself anymore, as at best he can convince Damian, but I don't think he's able to convince Cameron or Zoe, so I think Scott goes here. Episode 11's EP can be wary. I think Damian would win Brick would win the first part of the challenge, as he's remedying challenges, and then Brick would help Cameron get the necklace off, but Cameron wouldn't get on his back. So I think Brick would win immunity, as he's the fastest here. Cameron wouldn't win now because Lightning's not here to jump onto his back and tag on for the entire challenge. Now Zoe is still commando at this point, and Brick and Damian would face vote for Cameron because Brick and Damian have actually bonded, and I think Damian would realize they realize about each other. They're going to go next. And although Zoe's commando, she would side with Cameron to get rid of Damian. Now, I don't know what the tiebreak would be because it wasn't a tiebreak in the initial episode, but I'm pretty sure whatever the tiebreaker was, I think Damian could definitely defeat Cameron. With the only possibility being an intellectual challenge, even then Damian's pretty good at that type of stuff. And it's very hard to speculate what this would be, so I think they vote off Cameron. Episode 12 is the fire plant episode, and I think Damien gets attacked. Brick goes back to save him, and I think Zoe would win because without Cameron being here, there's no reason for Zoe to go back to save Cameron, so she wouldn't have a reason to turn back to her normal self, so she wouldn't save anyone, so Zoe wins the challenge. Now, I think Zoe would choose to get rid of Brick here. I think Zoe would choose to get rid of Brick here as the biggest threat is not immune. And although Damon is really smart, I think she would see him as a lesser threat. So I think she would get rid of Brick. So Damien and Zoe are both in the finale, with them actually down 3 seconds. In the ending, Zoe turns back to normal, and I think Damien realizes he can't actually face Commando Zoe hand-to-hand combat. So this is a complete timeline told drama on Rangers Island, and now we go into the reboot. So let's begin. Lightning would be on the route once the other sun falls. So Bowie still gets Caleb eliminated. Axel kicks. In episode 2, Axel would kick off her entire team. And I think Lightning wouldn't do that well here. In the shooting challenge, Lightning would be pretty good at this. But there's still no reason for Axel not to get voted off like normal. In episode 3, doesn't change either, so they are in a shell. And Scary Girl still goes like she does in the original. Okay, so now I get some actual changes. Because Damian isn't here, first of all, Damian's not here to want himself to get voted off. So I think what would happen is Detroit would still lose the challenge, and Millie convinced Lightning to get rid of Ripper, because not only of his fart noises, but he cost him the challenge, which gives Lightning more than enough reason to easily side with him to get rid of Ripper. And I think Chase would also vote Ripper, and these three vote probably Lightning, but whatever the tiebreaker is, I'm pretty sure they could easily would get here. So everyone votes off Ripper for his fart record. Episode 6 is still the same, so still no reason for MK not to go. And now we're at the merge. And in episode 8 is the egg basket episode, and I think Lightning be with Chase, be with Julia, Chase and Z, Bowie and Julia, which leaves Lightning and Z, and Raj and Wayne still get medically evacuated after this challenge. In episode 8, so in the Vomit Comment episode, Julia would win the challenge, and she would distract Z. Lightning wouldn't do that well here. And the big thing is, there's no and that's so a obvious outer would be a Lightning, but I think Julia would see that Lightning is so easy to manipulate, and Bowie, that although they want to get rid of him as fast as possible, they really want to keep him for a bit longer. And instead, I think Julia would get one to target Z in this challenge, considering the fact he would be the biggest threat and did the best outside of Ripper. So I think everyone votes off Z. In episode 9 is the paddling episode. And I think here the alliances, Julia and Emma. Julia would be with these guys, and Bowie and Emma and Chase vote would decide to go with Julia and Millie and Priya. And I think Julia still wins the challenge by default. So she has immunity. Now, they ask Lightning on who would he want to, which alliance to join to vote for. Now, I do think Lightning would side with. Now, I do think it's really tricky because Julia, Millie, and Priya vote for Chase, and Bowie and Emma and Chase vote for Millie. Now, I do think Lightning would side with Bowie to get rid of Millie, as I think Lightning would side with these guys to get rid of Millie. So I think Lightning would side with Bowie and Julia, but I think in the end, Lightning would end up siding with Bowie as he respects him a lot as an athlete. So I feel like he gets rid of Millie. Lightning has really strong players. I feel like he got along with Bowie pretty well. Episode 10 is bouncing on the beam, and Priya falls and Julia. I think Lightning would actually be really good in this challenge, so I expect Lightning to win the challenge as he is very good at momentum and very good at sports, so I think he wins immunity. And I think Bowie, Julia, and Priya would vote for Chase, like they do in the original. In episode 11 is the phones episode. I think Julia would still plant seeds between Emma and Bowie, which causes drama. Lightning doesn't do that well here, and I think Julia still wins the challenge. Now the thing is, Priya votes for Lightning because Julia's immune. Emma votes for Bowie. Lightning, so these two vote for Bowie, and Bowie talks to Lightning on how they need to get rid of Julia. So these two vote for Bowie. Priya votes for Lightning. There's one Lightning, two Bowie. Lightning also votes Emma. Bowie votes Emma. So I think Bowie also votes Lightning. Julia and Emma, there's a bit of drama. I think Emma still goes like in the original. So I think everyone votes off Emma, if I'm being honest. Episode 12 is guys versus girls. And I think Lightning is Bowie, basically in the episode where it's the final challenge Julia wins. I think Bowie and Julia kind of realize that Lightning's a bit too much of a powerhouse. They kind of need to put him off here. But Julia knows that Bowie and Emma are a pretty big drama. So I think, if anything, Julia, Lightning, Priya, I think Bowie votes, Emma votes Bowie, Priya and Julia vote, Julia and Bowie and Lightning vote for, I think everyone at these two vote for each other. Lightning, Priya votes for Lightning, these two vote for each other. So Lightning and Emma tiebreaker. So I think these two, Emma, Bowie, I think these two vote for each other, and Julia votes Emma. Priya and Emma vote Bowie, because, Julie's immune. And Lightning sides with these guys to get rid of Emma. So literally it's guys versus girls. Now it's literally Priya and Julia. It's Priya and Bowie versus Lightning and Priya. Now I do think Lightning and Priya would win because Bowie was originally throwing the challenge to try and get Julia out. So I do think Bowie would likely win the challenge. So I think Julia still goes like in the original. So Lightning, Priya, and Bowie are both in the finale. Basically, because there isn't any Millie, there's no drama on the teams. The first challenge remains the same up to the end portion. Now, Lightning will be able to get his log extremely fast and get to the end, so I do think Lightning would win the challenge. Unfortunately for Bowie, I can't see him being able to get to the end, so I think Bray is able to beat Bowie here. In the vomit comment, I think it's weird, but I think Lightning would win the season. And that's if there's anything watching this team extra to go on. If Lightning and Damian swap seasons, and yeah, peace and farewell.